My name is Kenna Klosterman, and welcome to Cost-Effective Creative Shoots with Lindsi Addler. Lindsi is a teacher, author, educator who was just named one of the brand new Canon Explorers of Light. And congratulations to you, Lindsi. She is here with us as one of our most prolific educators on Creative Live. So please help me welcome Lindsi Addler back to the Creative Live stage.
All right. You guys are good, very encouraging and very uplifting, so thank you. I am very happy that I was asked to do this presentation because basically it's show how you take pictures that you have fun taking. Like that was, you know what I mean? Cost-effective creative shoots. That's what I do for a living. And so no matter if I'm just shooting a more simplified portrait or something high fashion, cost-effective is always important because even the big clients, they want to know where they can save money. But if you look at my portfolio now, I think things look expensive, right? Okay. Actually, nowadays, it doesn't cost me any more money than it used to because I started and I built. Step by step, better connections, I have better resources and things like that. So today I am a fashion photographer in New York City. I've been in New York for 6 years now. I've been shooting for 15. And usually on photo week, it's usually my birthday, but this one was a little bit later. So I'm going to tell you all my birthday because I started when I was 15 and I've been in business for 15 years. so you get my birthday last week, okay? Excellent. Anyway, the point of this is that when I started with a budget of $0. Because I was 15, you have no money. And so I wanted to figure out how to build my portfolio and how to get to where I am today. So I'm going to walk you through not only how to figure out how to be creative, because I think that's a huge, huge barrier, something really difficult. How do you become creative? And then how to do so without spending a lot of money. So that is the core of what we will spend the rest of the afternoon on. And if anyone wants to connect with me, here's all of my social links. Probably the easiest way to ask me a question would be on Facebook through my Facebook messages, so send questions that way. And then also just chat on Instagram. That's where I update the most silly stuff, the fun stuff. All right, so here's the deal. Creativity is not expensive, and it blows my mind when I look at the photographers that I love, some of them that I absolutely adore, and they have behind the scenes of some of their shoots. And I was like, oh, they used a flashlight that was $5 from Walmart, and they got that incredible image. And we all know that, but the problem is we fixate and we think that money makes things better. So I've got some things. So it's not the money, like really, really it isn't. And so you'll see some of the gear that I'm using, the actual lights that I have here are pro photo gear. But every single shoot that I will show you today, you could do with whatever lights you have. It could be with speed lights, and I'll show you how you could do that. Or it could be with the alien bees that you have, or whatever lights that you have. Often, unless you have higher demands, light is light. It's how you modify it and what you do with it. And so for a long time, there were images in my portfolio that I did with like a 10-year-old beat up old light. It didn't matter with how I use it. So I'm going to give you some tips on that. And so just to give you an example, I'm going to use some of my old work, but some of my more recent work as well, to show you that it doesn't need to be complex, it doesn't need to be expensive, it doesn't need to be much of anything. So this is one of my favorite shoots of recent past. I shot this, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, earlier this spring in the summer here. In the winter. And this is one light off to the right. And in this case, it's a big umbrella with diffusion, but it could have been a big softbox. You could do this. So it's whatever light you have with a softbox or umbrella on it. The next thing down, it was 2 bags of flour from the grocery store. And then the last part is I had her bring a leotard, and I had some scrap tulle, the tulle fabric. I had some scrap tulle, and what we did is we took a piece of tulle, tied it around her waist, and then took the rest of it and strung it through. So the whole shoot, it really was scraps and a bag of flour and one light. And this is one of my favorite shoots that I did this entire year. And so when I see that, then I go, you know what? Sometimes I do make things too complicated. Sometimes, and sometimes really, when I simplify things, my ideas get more creative, because if I don't have 10 lights and all these crazy props, I have to start thinking, okay, what can I do to make this more exciting? So I find that challenging. Or here's another really simple shoot. This shoot is one light. It's a beauty dish off to the left-hand side, and there's beauty dish made for all different brands. They make beauty dishes for speed lights. I know that Photix makes a beauty dish for speed lights, so you can use it no matter what light you use. And then also I went to Joann Fabrics and grabbed a $10 piece of scrap fabric. We cut off a little piece that we tied around her chest, the other piece I wrapped around her head, and then we just flapped it. But the thing that I think is amazing is that I've gone to a couple meetings with art directors. They'll go through my entire portfolio, and 2 of them said, we like this image best. And it's the image that cost me $10 with one light. It's not the ones that are huge productions or really expensive to do, because it's all the idea behind that. So again, I'm saying, oh, you know, simple and clean is what captures people's attention, and it makes it more interesting. And a lot of times those are really inexpensive to make. Here's another that was really popular in my portfolio. It was a fashion editorial that I did with kind of an organic theme. We bought water-based paint and put it in her hair, which she agreed to, so we asked her. We bought pussy willows that they had at a floral shop. And then behind her, the background is a painter's cloth that we had. It was an extra one. We already had a painter's cloth, and it's window light. And you can actually see what the setup looks like in the next slide. So she is sitting, there's me laying on the ground, okay? She's sitting so that there's a window behind me. So it's nice, flat light on her face. But I wanted a little bit more drama. So I took 2 pieces of black foam core. It could be a piece of cardboard that's black, or at Michael's, you could grab one of those pieces of black foam core that they have. I think it's maybe $4.99 a piece. And I put it on either side of her. And what that does is it eats up the light on the side of her face, and that's why she has that really nice jawline and a little bit more shadowing. And so if you see, that was that burlap on her head. There was a spool of it for $6 at Michael's. So we did this whole editorial. It got published. It was really popular. And the whole thing, it was, maybe $15, $20 worth of props that I went around to Michael's in a florist shop and said, that looks organic. That looks organic, and kind of put the shoot together that way. But here's the other one that we have to talk about. So it's not the gear. No, really. It's really not the gear, I promise. So let's just take a look at that. In this shoot here, I wanted to do film noir, and I wanted it to be dramatic, but this was shot with speed lights. And these particular ones were shot with Photix speed lights, which are less expensive than a lot of the name brand ones, but there's ones that are even less expensive, like the Young Nuos. And if you have the right adapters, you'll get the same shot. And I don't think you would know that that creative shot was shot with a speed light. It doesn't scream speed light to me. And so if you want to know how this one's lit, the 2 back speed lights are totally bare, nothing on them. So no cost there. And then on the main light, that really tight, dramatic light on her face is something called a grid. And that's what grids do. They take the light and they shrink it down to a little circle. And so I have that grid and I have it really tight to her face. And so I get that Hollywood glam film noir look with speed lights. So if you've got studio lights, great. If you've got speed lights, great. If you like to shoot natural light, there's so many different things that you can do. So if you say it's the gear, it's an excuse. It totally is. Or in this example, I really like this shot. I think it's very soft and romantic. It was a 40-inch square softbox, and I shot the modeling light. It didn't even strobe. It's just the modeling light there. Or if you want to try something funky for a creative in-camera effect, you guys know Lens Babies? Lens Babies, you can get one of the kits for $300-400 for the actual base of it. And what they do is, they kind of call it the poor man's tilt shift. It's not really what it is. But what a Lens Baby allows you to do is it allows you, instead of having depth of field be you're in focus and the background's out of focus, instead there'll be a circle. And it'll say, okay, your head in that circle's out of focus, but everything outside of it, or the head is in focus and everything outside of it's out of focus. So instead of foreground to middle ground, background depth of field. It's actually like a tight circle and it fades away to the side. And that one's called a sweet 35. So as you can see, we got it established. It's not gear. You can shoot window light like we had for the organic shot. We can shoot one light. You could shoot a modeling light. The creativity isn't based on that at all. It's usually based on the ideas. But this is what I found. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story now. I started my business when I was 15, and I started with high school senior portraits and families, and those of you that know me know secretly I'm actually a huge nerd. But when I became a fashion photographer, I was attracted to fashion photography not because of the fashion, but because of the aesthetics. Like I just loved the way it looked. So I tried to dress the part a little bit better, but I really am a nerd, okay? Just trust me on it. So anyway, so when I first picked up photography, when I first started to experiment, I did not consider myself an artist. If anyone would have asked me if I was an artist, the answer was no. If anyone would have asked me if I was creative, the answer was absolutely, positively not. In high school, I took not studio art, I took computer-aided design. I didn't take a painting class, I took digital electronics. I took like the tech classes because that's what was interesting to me. So when I took up photography, I was much more on the technical and analytical side. You know, I wanted to understand, okay, this whole inverse square law thing, and I wanted to understand and I was the tech side of it. So I did not consider myself creative whatsoever. And if I show you some of my early work, you ready? I included these in my boot camp, some of these pictures, so you guys get to enjoy this again. So this was in 2004. And these are all shoots that I got paid for. And some are engagement sessions and high school senior portraits. And I was not flexing my creative muscle. I was not exercising it whatsoever. It was very, very weak and kind of sad. And so this is when I was actually just finishing, well, you all know my age, so it doesn't matter. Finishing up high school, okay, so this is in high school. I'm practicing, and I was the technician photographer, not the creative photographer. Saw myself completely differently. Okay, so I went to college, and I went to Syracuse University, and I took a class on fashion photography. And I fell in love. And like I said, it was the aesthetics. The light is beautiful, the posing is beautiful, the set, like everything works together, and it filled me. Like I would look at an image and it would just stimulate me in so many different ways. And so I started to say, okay, I want to do that. I want to be more creative. And now when I learn about lighting, it's not just so I can execute a photo and be the technical photographer. Now I want to use it as a tool, so when I have a creative idea, I know what tools to pick up. My brain kind of switched over. So if you fast forward to college, these are some of my college pictures. And the picture on the left was shot with a projector, just like a regular projector, and I found a pattern online, and that was my friend, and I took hair gel and I put her hair in the middle and I painted her with blue lipstick and stuff, and the girl in the middle was my roommate, the girl on the far right was my best friend, and I went to Michael's and just bought a ton of paint. Long story short, none of these photos are in my portfolio. And they have not been in my portfolio for a very long time. But I started to flex my creative muscles a little bit. There was no reason for me to cover a girl with paint, but I did it because I wanted to, and I was getting inspired. So what I did is I gave myself a budget of $125 a month total to spend on shoots. And that meant everything, anything that was related to the shoot. Now, at that time, I borrowed other people's gear. So I had friends, or there's people that I interned for or assisted that let me borrow gear to practice. Or I would use natural light or a projector. But the actual spending on shoot, things that I would buy or putting things together or paying for hair and makeup in the beginning, it was $125 a month. So I did that for quite a while. And now this is all pictures I took in the last 3 months. And now I don't pay for any of them. They don't actually cost me anything, because I've figured out a lot of the tips I'm going to give you in a couple minutes. But I've got a much better grasp on creativity for lighting, but also concept and the angle and all of it working together. So it is, I mean sincerely, it is a muscle. And it is something that the more you do, the more you create, I think you come up with more ideas. And it's when you're afraid to go try something that you're not practicing, you're not making mistakes, you're not learning anything, and so you don't become more creative. The best thing you can do is make mistakes. Because I've got all of these cool creative things that I came up with that originally were terrible mistakes that I then morphed into interesting solutions. So that's kind of some of my work. So this is how I felt. I always felt that I wasn't creative because I was the technician. And once in a while, I feel like I got a good photo. So there was this one photo I had in my portfolio, I think it's in here later on, with a girl where she had bright red lips and she has spiral glasses on. That was like one of my first fashion shots. And I used to think when I would get a shot like that, it was 100% luck. I happened to find something cool and happened to get a good photo out of it. Or I happened to come up with a good idea. I completely wrote it all off as luck. And so I kind of thought of it as lightning strikes. Like once in a while it's gonna happen. And once in a while I might be in the way, so it might work out. But you cannot be a professional photographer on luck. It does not work out. So what I did is I started surrounding myself with other creative people. In college, whether it was people that were film majors or other photographers, or I started to hang out with makeup artists and people like that. And what I realized is very firmly that creativity isn't out of luck and inspiration isn't thin air. It's not something that just happens. And there's some quote that I saw once that says something like, you know, inspiration doesn't come to you, you chase it with a club. And I was like, yeah, I feel very strongly about that. That's exactly what I do today. So this is what I figured out. As I watched more artists, and I didn't know this, I read now that there are books on this whole topic, but I didn't have an art background. There's something that's referred to as the creative process. All different photographers, different artists, when they create, they have something they do repeatedly, whether they realize it or not. You have a place that you get inspiration from, you just might not know it yet, but there is some place that is a source of inspiration over and over again. So professional artists, what they have to do to survive is they have to figure out that process and do it over and over and over again so that they have repeatability and reliability. And so they don't have to call on the muse and hope that it comes. They tell the muse to come here and then they have great ideas. So that's what it is. It's creativity broken down into steps. And so I would love to be able to say to you all, okay, here's the creative process, ready, go, and then give you exactly what you need to be inspired. However, I've taught classes alongside one of my very best friends, Brooke Shaden. She's an extremely creative photographer, and we both, and completely independently of one another, have done presentations on creativity and the creative process. And when we teach side by side, she'll tell her creative process, I'll tell mine, and they don't overlap at all. There's no similarities between them, or very, very few. When she is talking about inspiration, a lot of times it does have to do with emotions and more storytelling. If you look at me, I like things that are inspired by colors, and they're really clean and graphic, and it's more based on elements than on emotions and storytelling. And she gets her ideas one place, and I get it another. So here's the deal. You have to figure out your creative process. But I think far too often photographers that don't think they're that creative, they don't think about it because they're like, well, I'm not that creative. I don't have a creative process. And then you stay not so creative. So this is what I give you a task to do, an assignment, to figure out your creative process. And one way to start is if you look at your portfolio or all of the images you've ever taken, and if you look at your 3 favorite creative images, like the 3 favorite images you've ever taken. Don't just say those are my favorites, but actually figure out why. What do they have in common? Like what's the common subject matter? Maybe it's a color palette, maybe it's an emotion. And then when you're thinking about how you got there, ask yourselves, what inspired you? How did you get to that idea? And what do they all have in common? And I figured out in a lot of mine what my process was. I traced it back, and a lot of times I was inspired by a single object. And I'll tell you kind of how I developed mine in a minute. So it's a task for you to take a look at your own images and actually say, okay, as brilliant as I may be, that wasn't a moment of brilliance. Like, really, where did the idea come from? It came from somewhere. So trying to harness that in the future. And there's also, if you look online, there are tons of different creative exercises, things to test yourself and to get you to think outside the box. So one of them that I've actually done with Brooke in a workshop is something as simple as making lists and categories of random things. Lists of colors, lists of subject matters like chairs, ocean, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a list of moods, or maybe it's a feeling. And then make these massive lists and randomly connect the dots. So I need to do something with a red chair that feels angry. Even something like that just to push you, because you're going to do it your own way. And so if you can't come up with ideas, sometimes it's really interesting to say, all right, so if I'm stuck with doing a red chair that's anger, what does that remind me of? And maybe it reminds you of the Queen of Hearts. Maybe it's an Alice in Wonderland thing. And so then you do a shoot based on that. So you could do creative exercises if you just don't know where your ideas come from and you want to push yourself. Really what I usually do is exercise number 2, is I either pick a theme or a single subject matter. This is my personal style. So I will pick a pair of glasses that I know I have for a shoot. I found them on eBay, I found them whatever, like funky. And I'll say, all right, what does this remind me of? What does it feel like? It feels futuristic, right? Futuristic reminds me of metal. And I just brainstorm and write down all of the things that come to mind with this element. And then what I usually do is I go online and I say, okay, so I've got metal, I've got futuristic, I've got glasses, and I'll do some image searching. But it's basically a more organized way of connecting random dots, but the random dots came out of my head. I was looking at these glasses, what did it bring to mind? And I'll see all those lists and say, oh, okay, I could do something with these metal glasses on a metal background, and I'm going to add a blue tone because that feels futuristic to me. And I actually did that for a futuristic shoot. I made the background out of shiny poster board, and then I dressed it all in metal, and a lot of the metal I even got was just trimmings from a trimming shop, like the really cheap metal that they make necklaces and things out of. But it looked like she was a futuristic warrior. So there are creative exercises you can do if you don't know your creative process yet. So reflect on it and consider trying one of these. But my number one tip to being creative is to stop believing you aren't creative. Because that's what happened to me, is I didn't think I was creative, so then I had no process, so I had no repeatability, so I actually wasn't creative until I figured out how to harness it.